Saturday afternoon. It's been a long 5 hours, very dynamic, very realistic conflict de-escalation training. My team and I had a phenomenal day with the ushers and greeters at my church. And again, why conflict de-escalation? Why working with the ushers and greeters? I have a special guest right here, Maddie from Red Letter Project. She came all the way up here to Chile, Michigan from Georgia to see what the hoopla was all about, to see what the training was like and so on. And so I'll just ask Maddie, what do you think? What were your preconceived notions, if anything? And so what do you think about the day? 5 hours.
Yeah, so I came up here to observe. John and I have been friends for about a year now?
Maybe two,
Maybe
yeah.
2 years.
Time flies, yeah.
We met through the church safety guys.
Yep.
They're an awesome group of people, and I was blessed to meet John. And I was like, hey, let me bug you and see if I can come observe a class. I feel like that would be awesome. And thankfully he was nice enough to let me do that, and I'm really glad I did. Definitely worth my time. But the whole reason I came up here was to see what his version of de-escalation looks like, because he is the absolute man when it comes to this topic. And so to see the way you presented the material and walk the students through the scenarios, it was very, very refreshing to see how crystal clear the information was and how it was, like I said, how it was presented, because it was basic enough for everybody, no matter who you are, no matter what your role is, whether you're a church greeter, you're a security guard, you're a police officer, you're a regular person that has nothing to do with security. De-escalation, I think, is something that's valid for everybody. You don't have to be in a security role necessarily to understand and be able to apply it in everyday life. So I kind of wanted to just talk about the importance and relevance of de-escalation to the everyday person, because I think there's a lot of people in our community that might not even know what de-escalation necessarily means. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's this misconception by the general media because of social media and stuff that they see on the internet that gives them this false idea that there's this one thing that you could say or do that would just all of a sudden
save everything,
right? Sunshine, marshmallows, and unicorns. And that is such a lie. And you see good people out there meaning well, they want to do a good job, but under stress, they end up saying or doing things that end up escalating situations. And that's one of the things I point out in my conflict de-escalation classes. I stay away from trying to be all academic. This is not another college level class using big words. I simplify it so that under stress, you're more likely than not going to remember these basic concepts, tips, and techniques. Because we've all may have heard the the phrase, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the lowest level of your training, or something along those lines. And one of the things a lot of people realize is this is not just something you do as a security guard or at church. This is stuff you can do to maintain the peace in your own house with your spouse, 100%. Your kids, or even a co-worker. These are basic people skills. How do you negotiate and navigate a stressful situation with someone who's just having a bad hair day? All right, so.
Well, and so you have a really good definition of de-escalation. Can you?
My definition, based on my own life experiences and observations, is lowering the intensity level of a potentially volatile situation to prevent it from becoming a critically violent incident. And it's a mouthful, but that's basically what you're trying to do. It's just lower that intensity level to make sure everyone goes home safe and nothing gets broken. But even if something gets broken, we have insurance for that.
How to mitigate it. Well, and I think a lot of people, they have this preconception that's not necessarily true, that de-escalation means that you're a passive person. And in my mind, if you really are practicing true de-escalation, it's actually the opposite, because you're so much on the active side of preventing something from happening. Just because you're not being hyper confrontational does not mean that you're being passive. So can you talk about that too?
There's a lot of people who, they can academically sit there and rationalize, yes, we want to avoid conflict. They go through self-defense classes, they go through CCW classes, and they get their permit. And yes, I understand I'm supposed to avoid conflict. But in the moment, right now, when someone's getting loud and rude in your face or flicking you off in another car, why aren't you just letting it go? Why are you letting yourself get sucked down this rabbit hole? And why are you worried about some knucklehead in the other car flipping you off? Where's the imminent danger of great bodily harm or death? Where is the damage to your car? Why are we getting hung up on that? And same thing, I see good people meaning well, but unfortunately, they let themselves get sucked down this rabbit hole because they become offended, frustrated, or impatient, and they end up saying or doing things that escalate situations when all they had to do was just walk away.
Right.
Just walk away.
Or just learn to talk to people and like have a basic conversation that's not like leaning in the direction of making it confrontational. Or sometimes, you mentioned in the class too, this was really important, where sometimes just having a conversation, connecting with somebody with something that has nothing to do with what they're upset about or what they're possibly causing conflict about is really, really useful and helpful.
It's a very effective distracting tool. I've seen it work in real life. I've seen it happen very effectively with my scenarios. When you're engaging with someone, and for example, I use a veteran, for example, you're engaging with someone who's loud, rude, and obnoxious, and you're noticing that they're wearing an Army hat or veteran hat, or they're wearing a unit patch. Out of the blue, you can just suddenly ask them, hey, is that a 24th Infantry Division patch? You know, just out of the blue, just create a whole different topic, because it's going to cause them to get out of their OODA loop. Right, it's going to get them outside of that focus of being loud, rude, and obnoxious, and then have to re-engage their brain and think about something else. Is this a 24th Infantry Division patch? And as long as you get them distracted in that one split second away from being overly focused on being loud and rude and obnoxious towards you, you can begin the de-escalation process. It just takes a split second interruption. Where'd you get that jacket? Where'd you get those shoes? Is that a third ID patch? You know, it's just something can be very, very effective.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I liked a lot too is just that de-escalation is not one thing that you're going to say. It's not something that, it's not some magic word or magic like facial expression you can make. You made it a really big emphasis in the class to talk about how it's a process. It's something that has a combination to do with a bunch of different things: your facial expression, your tone of voice, how you're empathetically listening. It's not just, I say blah, 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 and everything is nice and happy again. So I think that's a really important process for students and people, not only to learn and understand, but also practice. De-escalation, I think it pops up in little micro places every single day, right? So these conversations you're having with friends, family, whatever, throughout the day, there's no way that you can't practice de-escalation in just little bits at a time, throughout your day, your everyday life. So
beginning with not letting yourself be offended by what someone else is saying or doing. On any given day, when you're in your car driving, you are liable to potentially get frustrated or impatient or offended by some other jackass driver. They're doing something or saying something.
Or somebody on the internet.
or someone on the internet, right? You don't have to take it personally. You don't have to let it get to you. And I know it's not necessarily easy, but as we can attest through life experiences and observations, that is really what you got to do.
Right.
You've got to be able to let it go. You've got to be able to not become overly frustrated, impatient, or offended, because otherwise you just could potentially spiral out of control.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then it's like on the other end of it too, where again, it's not passive. You can de-escalate up to a certain point, but also having the skills and capability where if something is not working with de-escalation, and no matter what you've tried, it still doesn't work, having the capability to actually protect yourself once that point has come is also very important. But like I said, the best way to avoid getting hurt or going to jail or never seeing your family again or possibly getting in a conflict where somebody dies, that can all be potentially avoided if you can learn to use your words and use your facial expressions, your body language and stuff. Like, obviously you can't always depend on that, but that at least helps, especially on a regular everyday basis.
It goes back and how, talking about your words and your tone of voice, because we have all been in a situation where someone spoke to us what we consider disrespectfully, and it has something to do with their tone of voice or the attitude. For example, there's a very large difference in if I said, ma'am, could I just explain this to you? And ma'am, can I explain this to you? Very different connotation, and she's going to receive it very, very differently. The first one is more empathetic, compassionate, ma'am, I'm trying to help you. But the second one was very condescending, dismissive, like, you're stupid. And that could potentially escalate a situation. So it always goes back to being able to use your tone of voice and your words. to try to avoid trouble, to
Yeah.
make sure you go home safe.
And I like, there's literally a quote in my head that you said in class today. It was something like, you can call somebody stupid by just the tone of your voice.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how often do I do that unintentionally? Or
Right.
like, you know, or even when you feel somebody do that to you, it doesn't feel good. So apart from just de-escalation, a lot of it has to do with just learning to love other people.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this last night. If you're the kind of person, kind of like me, that's a little bit blunt sometimes, doesn't necessarily mean to come off like that, but that's just naturally how you are. Learning how to read your own body language and be self-aware with your tone and stuff is really valuable, I think, just in making friends in general.
Yeah, I see. Absolutely right. For people who have a sarcastic, dry humor,
Yep.
I have seen those people inadvertently escalate situations when they didn't mean to, but it's just because of their sense of humor, or the
Right.
way they come across to people. And that's why you've got to slow down, assess the situation,
Yeah.
and have that self-discipline to recognize, okay, I know that I have a tendency to be sarcastic or have a dry sense of humor. Let me try not to be funny right now.
Right.
Because otherwise this person is going to feel like you're mocking them, you're laughing at them, you don't take them seriously, and that can only escalate a situation.
Yeah, and I think like this entire class, this entire topic, it just comes down to people skills.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people like getting offended or getting super irrational about things, it's just a lack of people skills. So
Yep.
the more you can practice it, like I don't think the large majority realizes how much de-escalation is literally, it's just practice. People skills are practice. Anybody can learn it, no matter how introverted you are, no matter how unfriendly you feel like you naturally are. It's a learned skill. So it's something that everybody, I think, can benefit from.
Oh, absolutely. You're not always going to get it right, but if you always maintain a focus and an effort to be ministry minded, or at least try to do it right, show some empathy, compassion, some concern for your fellow man, I think a lot of the crap that we see in the world
Yeah.
today would just disappear.
Yeah.
I mean, be nice, agree to disagree, walk away. Bam.
Right. Yeah.
But everyone in this day and age seems to allow themselves to get offended and
Yeah. And can you real quick just like kind of expand on ministry mindset, because that is also something and that term specifically is interesting to me, because people say it a bunch of different ways, especially if you own a business that's faith-based or like you have some sort of ministry aspect to your business. But can you expand on what specifically ministry mindset means?
For me, ministry mindset is recognizing that the other person you're dealing with, no matter how loud, rude, obnoxious they are, that other person is still a child of God. And they may be misguided, they may be misinformed, they may be intoxicated, whatever, but that's still a child of God. And if you're a believer, you're supposed to be a new creature. You're supposed to have a renewed mind. Are you acting like it? And so that's the challenge. If you claim to be a believer and a new creature and with a renewed mind, are you acting like it? Again, it doesn't mean you're always going to get it right, but do you at least make an effort to be cognizant of your role of being a light in a dark world, of being an example, being an inspiration to other people?
Sweet. Yeah, so that was our wrap up of
That's
conflict
right.
de-escalation, ministry mindset, and having better people skills.
And you know what? Let me just close with this. In Proverbs 15:1 in the Message translation, a gentle response diffuses anger. And I've seen that work, folks. Gentle response diffuses anger.
Yep.
Have a blessed day.